this
Hi, hi. I have a question for Thomas. I just wanted to know whether you've tried a different pH, because it was quite interesting to see the different temperature had a different impact. But I just wanted to know whether you've tried a different pH, or it was just all the same.
This one's not working. Do I have to press? Oh, there it is. Marvelous. I'll just hand this over.
No, well, in this study we aimed to explore the effects of temperature, and obviously this is a common knowledge that that both pH and temperature, they're one of the important factors working with enzymes. But in this case we didn't modulate both factors, so just because the main focus was temperature. But however, it was a very like a pilot study just to explore feasibility, whether it's worth going further, whether it has some practical sense to explore more. And of course in the next steps, like all factors, they should play together like in a good orchestra. So, and we just try to introduce one of the missing factors so far. I hope I answered the question.
Hello. Hi, I'm here. Wonderful talks from all the opening speakers. Thank you so much. My question concerned in Paolo's talk, where you showed on the canvas saturating with a silicon solvent and then that limiting the tide line formation. Have you any idea how that happens or why it happens? It's very interesting.
Well, because every time you do a treatment like that, you use a siloxane to saturate the surface. Basically, you make it temporarily hydrophobic. And so water has an effect, I would say, on the very, very superficial part of the object you are treating. Also, by itself, agar will always produce a less pronounced tide line, because if you use a concentrated agar, will tend to take up water, and so whatever water dissolves will be drawn into the gel rather than spread around. But still you do have some tide line. If you make the surface hydrophobic, you probably further restrict spreading of water. And so it becomes possible to treat a canvas with different, gel application without having overlapping areas that and are kind of difficult to remove.
Hi, Richard in particular. Can you hear me?
Can you speak up if you can?
Sorry, do I? Oh, here we go. Hi, Richard. It's
Hi.
Pam.
Hey, Pam.
That was wonderful. And thank you. And I wonder, I mean, the day is young and we have a lot of agar to discuss, but I was wondering if you are aware that anybody's going to talk about putting chelating agents in agar. And if not, if you could make a few comments about it, but also in particular whether there is a need for clearance if you're using a chelating agent.
Yeah, I mean, anything that you apply to a surface, you'd have to worry about clearing. Anything that's not volatile, of course. So I think the reason why I like agarose, for instance, is that as Paolo has indicated, it's a neutral gelling material. So you can basically raise and lower the pH, have chelating and buffering materials in there. And the carrier, the agarose itself, won't affect essentially the performance of those materials. So that's an upside. Again, you can probably, through all of the things that we've been talking about, through a number of the talks, control whether solutions move into or stay at the surface of very porous objects. And just that act alone actually makes clearance a little bit easier too. But yeah, in the end, you'd have to think about, if you're putting something on a surface, how are you going to get back off that surface? One way is excluding it from a porous material with a silicon solvent, like Paolo talked about. Another way is making use of that really strong capillary force in agarose gels. When you get to high percentages, you can really pull things back in there. So again, that's kind of, in a way, self-clearing some of the material that you put on the surface. In the broadest sense, I think we do need to invoke chelation chemistry, in a lot of things. I think in a lot of artifactual surfaces, what we really struggle with are really insoluble salts, metal salts, calcium, magnesium, iron, copper, things like that. And so I think chelating materials in general will always play a role in one degree or another in aqueous cleaning. So. Is that okay? Is that okay, Pam?
This is a question for Céline Delattre. I would like to ask you, did you respect the binding of the album, of the drawing? Did you treat the drawings keeping the album bound, or?
Yes, because the pages were already detached, so I didn't remove the binding. It was already removed. And then I have done a new binding. I restored the old binding, but then, yes.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talks. And the question is about to Paolo Thomas, who both of you mentioned the use of enzymes in gels. And the question is practical. How do you apply enzymes? You can't cook them with the gels in the microwave. How do you apply them?
Each enzyme, they have their temperature optimum, so have to stay below the temperature after which they start to denature. So you simply apply them, after the gel has cooled enough, and which is, for example, if the optimum is 60, you just apply them before that while the gel is cooling. So it's quite simple. I don't know, maybe Paolo.
Yeah, if you remember, there was a slide showing that instead of, normally I would do, as an example, 3 grams of agar, 100 milliliters of water, and then let's say 10 milligrams of enzyme all together. Instead, I do only a little water with the enzyme. I pre-warm that to 50 centigrades. Then I make the agar gel with pure water, and when the gel is cooling down and it's at 50, I mix the two solutions. The important part is not to go above 55 centigrades, which is generally a denatured temperature for most proteins. Would you like to add something?
No, I was just going to add, remember there are two forms of agarose. There are regular gelling point agarose preparations that form gels really when they get down to about 45 degrees, something like that. And then you can actually buy, they're much more expensive, but you can buy low gelling point agarose preparations that gel.
By the time you get down into that range of 32 to 45, you can probably get a lot of proteins into those gels. The enzymes and things will have denaturing.
I just would like to know that actually in those cases when instead of using enzymes in powder form, for example at Work Museum we use enzymes which are in liquid form already, and those are very convenient to use with gels, and there is really no practical complications adding them during the cooling process, but just choosing the enzyme which is suitable for that purpose.
Hi, I have a question for Céline. If I understood correctly, you check the pH of the paper before you wash it.
Can you wave? We can't see you. Oh, good, thank you.
So you check the pH of the paper before you did the cleaning and the gel test, and the pH was 6. As far as I can see, the pH is quite good, and I wouldn't wash anything unless pH is 4, because normally water you will use to wash the paper would be about 5 or 5.5. So I just wanted to know why you felt it was necessary to wash the paper, and what you have achieved by washing paper that is pH 6.
Yes, the pH was 6, but when you look at it, it was very yellowed and with lots of frozen stains, and that's that's what we wanted we wanted to have an improvement of the aspect. That's what the creator wanted, an improvement of the aspect of the paper. So that's why we did that. And before taking the pH, we thought it was less than 6. We were a little bit surprised to see that.
How do we know the paper has discolored if pH is 6? I mean, paper might be already slightly yellower than we expect.
Can you repeat the question, Yunsen?
Because you said the paper seemed discolored, but if pH is 6, it hasn't obviously, its paper hasn't gone acidic. So how do you know that paper has discolored?
It was an observation and also a discussion with the scientists in the National Library that agreed to do this treatment.
Brilliant, thanks a lot.
There's a couple more questions up the back there. Good, hands are popping up.
Hi, I was curious, how is it that you get agarose that gels at different temperatures? What causes it to gel?
Where are you? Up the back. Thank you. Who's your question to?
I guess Richard Bowlers.
Well, as Paolo showed you, native agar really is a combination of two carbohydrates, that agropectin and basically agarose. Depends on how you purify it and how you do that. There are probably a dozen different ways of purifying agarose from agropectin, by separating and cleaning it up. Depending on the process, you can end up with different molecular weight sizes of agarose. If it's very intact, if it's pretty much unchanged by the extraction process, if it's at its highest molecular weight, it's going to have the highest gelling temperature. If it's actually a little lower in molecular weight, if it's broken down a little bit in that extraction and purification process, it could actually have a much lower sort of gelling temperature, a point at which it starts to come together fully to form that rigid sort of structure. So it's really molecular weight, believe it or not.
More questions. There's one there in the middle.
Thank you very much for the talks. It was very, very exciting to listen to all. But can I have a question to Flavia, please? I'm very interested in your weighting method because when I used agarose in the past, I weighted my gel a little bit in the hope of achieving a good contact. And what happened was water all oozed out and it was terribly upsetting. So, and then I saw you waiting and I kind of wanted to know if you have to do any fine-tuning, how much weight was actually on it, and how did you find sort of the problem of water oozing out?
I'm not sure I understood the question, but you asked me about weight within the specimens. So we weigh the specimens in a climate box. So we had RH and heat temperature always controlled, and we keep them stable. And we weigh the specimens before and after the contact with the gel. And we found out that using 3% gels, the intake of water was minimal. So we had minimal increase of weight. And if you want some more specifics, I can't remember that now, but they are probably in the article. I can't remember how big was the increase of weight, but it was really minimal. Contact time 3 minutes, well, definitely very low values.
kind of on the topic of green chemistry and replacing, toxic materials with something more sustainable. And one of the major problems that a lot of people are facing today is the use of an incredible amount of aromatic solvents to, let's say, remove a very stubborn synthetic varnish applied in the 40s. And I know this is kind of like a very general question, but I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on whether it's something that could be perhaps in a future solvent gels or a different cleaning system, to kind of improve this kind of problem.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be too far in the future, because a lot of people, of course, are beginning to produce and use greener solvents. And again, by the word green, I mean biosourced, bioproduced, non-petroleum necessarily derived. Whenever anybody asks me about this kind of stuff, I basically say we've all been kind of spawned in an ocean of solvents from paint making and varnish making. The solvents that we're given as our sort of working palette of solvents, the things that include aromatics like xylene and toluene, are really unique to that history. It has nothing to do with what's out there, what's available, and whatever. If we were adopting solvents from cosmetic chemistry, we would already be using materials that are down the drain, degradable sort of things. To give you an example, biodegradable solvents like dibasic esters, things like that, could actually begin to replace some of the solvents that we use for aliphatic hydrocarbons. Solvents that are just lightly unsaturated, that not necessarily are aromatic, have already been used in cleaning systems and cosmetics to replace aromatic materials. You'll be familiar with things like limonene, those kinds of solvents that are citrus-based or derived. Those things they've come online in the last 10, 20 years, really as replacements for aromatic solvents in commercial paint strippers and cleaners and home products and things. So the replacements are already there. It's really our job just to kind of stand up, move over, pick them up, and begin to experiment with them ourselves.
I would like to add something. For example, look on the internet. Eastman Kodak has a document that is xylene replacement, because all the paint industry has moved already in that direction. There are, for example, they list a number of solvent mixtures, for example, a saturated hydrocarbon with isobutyrate or a long-chain ketone, and the solvent mixture have the same volatility of xylene and the same polarity. So there are already several alternatives to aromatics, and you can download all that information from Eastman Kodak. Okay. Look for xylene replacement.
We've been looking at adjusting the pH of gel and gums, and have found some sort of interesting phenomenons as they age, as they refrigerate, aging the next day. Some adjustments and changes in pH as the gel is around. It's a question for everybody, both on, do you know a little bit about the mechanisms? Because it's not an equal change depending on how high your pH was when you started, and the practical use of, did you make fresh gel every time you used it, or did you make a batch and use it for the whole experiment?
Like musical chairs. These gels need time to form. They need time to form, of course. The rate of cooling can affect kind of how these polymers interlace. The difference is in a gelling gun, for instance, there are really two kinds of molecular weight sizes of the carbohydrate that make the gelatin. One that's very high in molecular weight will go together and form a rigid gel pretty quickly, but then additional cooling will bring the other lower molecular weight sort of material into a network and whatever. So that's one difference. You just might be seeing a difference between, the full gelation and not quite. The other thing is gelatin is also tied together with calcium. So remember that, the polymer, part of the strength of that kind of rigid gel is through cross-linking through a metal ion. calcium. Gelin has a principal polymer that carries an acid group on it, and you form salts with that, with metal ions. So you might actually see that slightly shift or change, as things cool. That's just inherent to the materials.
I see less pH variation in time with agar gels. However, my attitude toward rigid gels is always, make it and use it. Make it fresh and use it. Before it falls, see where out.
Or have a discussion about preservatives and antibiological materials.
I have a question for Professor Wolbers. At the end of your talk here, so at the end of your talk, I think you gave something very inspiring, talking about removing the source from facades of buildings and so on, the stage, which I guess is also a problem. My question is whether there is a profile of these residues long after whatever treatment was conducted, and if there was any test ever done.
I can tell you that when I go to clean a building in Washington, every time we go up on the scaffolding and just wet the building with water, it will foam. There will be bubbles coming over. So literally, it doesn't take much of an analysis stage. But to characterize the materials, we've actually characterized them as simple salts of palmitate and stearate. In other words, in a way, for generations almost, the same kind of material was used to wash those buildings. It was good old ivory snow, the old sodium palmitate, sodium stearate sort of mix of soaps. So that's, in most of the cases, what was left behind as a residue. But the problem is compounded again and again. In other words, if those residues are left behind and they allow some kind of biocolonization, whatever colonizes that surface then dies, and then something grows on that, and then something grows on that. It becomes almost an enormous out-of-control spiral, with buildup of materials, resulting in these very blackish biofilms that can develop on buildings and facades. And there's just no good way to reverse all that yet. One thing we can do right away is begin to adopt other materials, things that have higher clearance values and are biodegradable, things that we can wash off the building and aren't retained very strongly. So all we can do is stop the cycle for the moment, and then work backwards with what's there.
So we're talking about something which is a very polymer sub-layer within.
They're very deeply entrained. Yeah, these things are, in buildings it's common to sort of wash them with soap and then do a high pressure wash afterwards and dry the material in a little deeper. And these things are entrained very deeply in those porous surfaces.
Most of these discussions and tests for residues of salts somehow they concern the treatment in situ. So once we take the surface, whatever the surface is, we leave it behind, and having peace of mind that we did some cleansing. But I guess the problem might be even more complex when we talk about paints, for example.
Yeah, I think we have to worry about it all. That's what, again, as I say, sets us apart from many other cleaning engineering endeavors. We have to worry about clearance. We can't do things fine. But we can break the cycle for the moment. We can really begin to look at other materials and identify the ones that really don't have the right numbers. I can show you right now commercial cleaners that are being used on buildings that have the wrong numbers. They're biodegradable, perfect, but they're strongly absorbed onto mineral surfaces. Really bad news. So we have to begin to change that mindset. Thank you.
We have time, I think, for a couple more questions. There's a hand up. Yes.
Hello, I've got a question about the residues as we're talking about. So agarose is quite, the mold is going quite good on it. So if you are cleaning, for instance, plaster or, as you said, paper, So have you checked residues? You say there are no residues, or if and you are eager or anxious about residues on a canvas, so would you always recommend, for instance, to hydrophob also the plaster when you are cleaning with agarose?
For plaster, I showed you that GCMS analysis of the plaster treated with an agar gel, and the residual amount of galactose was trace amount. So, if you think that the plaster is probably one of the most porous surfaces we have, I would not be so concerned with making plaster hydrophobic with siloxane.
The other thing I just want to add is, how you do things sometimes counts as much as what you use. I just ran a workshop just a week ago where we were making agarose gels, and if some of the gels weren't heated all the way, all the agarose wasn't dissolved, well, it can't cool back down and have that fully interlaced sort of structure. I mean, depending on how you prepare it, you could actually, prepare something that might leave more of a residue on the surface. But if it's actually prepared well, if you really do get it into solution, if you actually tie it all up, then most of that polymer is essentially one big polymer that's interlaced. So, but you always have the option to use that pre-treatment with the silicon solvent to help exclude things as well.
I forgot to mention something important in my presentation first. When we treat very sensitive surfaces like canvas or paper or plaster with agar, we do 2 cycles of cooling and heating and cooling, because after the second cycle, even visually, the gel will look different. It will be more compact. It will have the ideal retention of water. So I think it's safer to go like that on a sensitive surface.
I just wanted to add, as regards clean plaster, alabaster, or other porous and organic surfaces, I just returned a few days ago from Brussels, a conference on plastic cleaning, and actually an interesting opportunity this could go off, but not by developing gel-based methods, for example, for plaster, developing like a non-contact cleaning method, for example, using atmospheric atomic oxygen, which is a different method, but it's particularly suited for inorganic surfaces such as plaster. And this is, I think, some interesting future development.
One lucky last question. Many hands. I think yours at the back there was up first.
Thank you. This question is for Cremonesi, and I've seen many conservators that they use tissue paper, like between the agar and works on paper. What do you think about using any support, maybe to prevent these residues?
Well, I always wonder if that's an effective procedure. Whenever I use a gel, I try to take advantage of direct contact of the gel with the surface, because also you have some emulsifying power, some like a surfactant-like ability of the gel that you want to take advantage of. So I generally do not use interfaces.
No, I can't add anything. I would say the same thing. I think what you really want to do, for instance, with agarose, is actually just very well make the gel, that is, interlace it, form the gel structure properly, and therefore control the pore size within the gel. The reason you would use an agarose gel is for that capillary force and wetting and osmotic pressure and whatever. Those things really are only effective, I think, if you bring them to a surface. If there's some intermediary, half of that effect is lost.
Okay, I think we're probably very hungry.